Galactic date 4729, orbit of the Nova Terra colony. The darkness of interstellar space split as the huge silhouettes of Imperial warships emerged from hyperspace. The ship's sleek hulls shone in the light of the local sun, reflecting the cold glint of steel and energy shields. Huge as entire cities, the Zakor Empire cruisers had arrived for the inevitable and, they believed, imminent conquest of the human colonies. On the flagship bridge of the Unbreakable Judgment, the lead ship of the expeditionary fleet, Admiral Zihan watched the deployment of the troops. His 4 yellow eyes carefully studied the holographic display, which showed data on the defense of the human colonies. "What do we have, strategist?" he asked, without even turning around. The fleet's chief strategist, Jack Thornton, leaned over the panel. "Minimal resistance, my lord," he said, his clawed hand dragging across the screen as a 3-dimensional model of the system appeared above the table. "Their largest cruiser is only a fifth the size of our light destroyer. This is not a war, but rather a procedure." Admiral Zihan grimaced. "What a boring task. Very well, then. We'll proceed with standard protocol. We jam communications, lock down the planet. We've got landing parties on the surface. It's time to break down these toy fortifications." His officers bowed in synchronization and began to execute the order. The surface of the New Terra colony, the main administrative center. The sky split. At first it looked like a starfall, but each of the bright trails was not a meteor, but landing modules with Empire infantry. Their armored hulls crashed to the ground with a terrifying roar, kicking up clouds of dust and debris. The governor of the colony, Robert Douglas, looked at this picture from the roof of the command center. He smoked in silence as his officers received reports of the capture of the city. "We were given orders not to harm civilians, Governor," said one of his aides, Captain Williams. "Even our military are mere targets in the eyes of the Empire." The ground shook as the invaders' heavy armored vehicles landed. Several patrol drones tried to fight back, but their missiles simply bounced off the shields of the enemy vehicles. The first groups of invaders moved forward. Tall, covered in biotech armor, they resembled living sculptures with predatory eyes and blade-like limbs. Governor Douglas stepped forward. "We are a civilian colony. We cannot fight." The leader of the invaders, Commander Karak, stopped in front of him. "Then you won't be hurt." As he spoke, the Empire troops were deploying mobile command posts. Snipers took up positions. Drones controlled the sky. The whole process looked like a rehearsal. They had done it hundreds of times before. The Imperialists were expecting pleas, panic, and chaotic resistance. Instead, they received silence. No one cried. No one fell to their knees. People just looked at the invaders, without fear, no despair. This made Karag tense for a moment. "Is something wrong, Commander?" one of his officers asked. He did not answer. At that moment, somewhere deep underground in the dark tunnels, an old soldier, Captain Jack Thornton, was watching the colony's security footage. Next to him stood a group of men in darkened battle armor, no emblems, no insignia. "Jack, is everything going according to plan?" came a voice over the communicator. Thornton smiled. "Like clockwork. They think they've won. The flagship is the Enduring Judgment." Admiral Zihan was looking at the report from the surface. "Too fast." Sawthorn, the chief strategist, nodded. "Their silence worries me, my lord. All civilizations beg for mercy when they realize they are powerless. Humans." He did not finish his sentence. "Imperial forces have sent a new report. No explosions, no attacks, no demands. Just silence." For a moment, Admiral Zihan felt an inexplicable unease, but then he shook it off. Humanity has fallen, hasn't it? Galactic date 4730, planet New Terra. The night was dark as an arrow in the eye. A heavy haze hung over the colony, which seemed to absorb sound and light. Only rare lanterns at the Imperial checkpoints pierced the gloom, but their glow seemed frail and defenseless. At first glance, the invasion of the Empire was complete. There were no military units left on the streets, no organized resistance. People did not shout, did not protest, did not fight. They were simply silent. Admiral Zihan sat in the command chair on the bridge of the Unbreakable Judgment, peering at the streaming reports from the surface. "Report!" he barked, turning to the chief strategist, Zathorn. The latter slid a claw across the panel, bringing up the operations map on the holographic table. "We've lost contact with 16 patrols in the northern sector. No sign of a fight, no alarms. They just disappeared." Zihan squinted. "What about the security cameras?" Zathorn pursed his lips. "That is the worst part, my lord. They show nothing. You mean all the cameras failed at the same time? No, they're all working. But when we look at the footage, the strategist turned on the video from the Imperial checkpoint. It's nighttime, an empty street. The guards are standing at their positions, 1 second, 2, the third, and suddenly, a sharp jump in the video. The next shot, there is no one to guard the post. The soldiers have disappeared. Only the abandoned equipment remained. Zahan felt a chill run down his spine. This is impossible. Sawthorne swallowed his saliva. I wish it were. Imperial Base Omega 17, 0230 local time. Sergeant Takral was squeezing into the seat of the watchtower, trying to see something in the darkness. Don't you think it's gotten a little quiet in here? He muttered to his partner, Officer Giroux. Takral wasn't so sure. Something about the silence was different than usual. Suddenly the radio came to life. Post 3, check your position. You haven't been answering your calls. The sergeant frowned and pressed the transmitter. This is Post 4. Post 3, report. Silence. Post 3, no response. The damned idiots must have fallen asleep, Giroux grumbled. Takral was about to agree when he heard it. Somewhere in the darkness, a sound rang out. What was that? He whispered. Giroux pulled out his motion scanner, but the screen showed only static. Maybe the wind? There's no wind here. The sound came again. And again. It wasn't random. It was a step. Takral clutched his rifle and slowly stepped down from the tower. The flashlight in his hand shook. It illuminated empty crates, metal containers, concrete walls. It was empty, but something was here. He could feel it. Sergeant, get back here, hissed Giroux. But Takral was no longer listening. His eyes were fixed on something ahead. A human figure. It stood motionless between the containers, its face lost in the shadows. Freeze, he barked, aiming his rifle. No response. Stop or I will open fire. Silence. And then, movement, but not forward. The figure simply disappeared. Takral felt icy needles of fear run down his spine. He didn't know what had happened, but his heart was pounding furiously in his chest. Post 4, we have contact. The radio crackled with interference. He turned around and saw Giroux, or rather what was left of him. His eyes were staring into the void. His mouth was wide open and his face was frozen in a look of horror. But there were no wounds on his body. Takral felt the cold fingers of fear clenching around his throat. And then he realized he had not been killed. He had been broken, deep underground. Human headquarters. Captain Jack Thornton watched the events through hidden cameras. Phase 1 complete. His men in black armor watched the recordings in silence. They are afraid. They are beginning to doubt. They don't know it yet, but the war has already begun. What's next? One of the cameramen asked. Thornton smiled, his eyes sparkling in the dim light. Now we're going to make them crazy. Galactic date 4760. Planet Nova Terra. 1 month since the invasion. The Imperial forces no longer looked like invincible conquerors. Instead of proud warriors marching through the streets, the city was filled with exhausted, dirty soldiers. Their armor was covered with dust, their eyes were empty, and their patrols now walked in groups of 5 to 7, looking back at every sound. The problems began with disappearances, then with communication failures. And now they didn't have enough food. The command center of the occupation forces. Admiral Zahan stood over the desk, clenching his fists. His claws left scratches on the holographic panel. Explain to me how, in the name of the Empire, 300,000 soldiers are without supplies. The chief supply officer, Officer Lakir, bowed his head in front of him. We do not know, my lord. Zahan took a deep breath, trying to control his rage. What do you mean we don't know? Our warehouses are empty, my lord. No sign of forced entry. No sign of transportation. Just gone. The Admiral slammed his fist on the table. Supplies don't just disappear. Zathorn, his chief strategist, cleared his throat. There's another problem. Zahan turned to him sharply. Another? Zathorn nodded slowly. Desertion. Zahan felt a muscle in his cheek twitch. How many? Zathorn looked down. About 10,000. More have requested to be sent home. There was dead silence. Then an explosion. Home! They're trying to escape! Zathorn did not dare look up. We are not used to this kind of resistance, my lord. Not physical, he stuttered, searching for words, but psychological. Imperial Base Gamma 12. Sergeant Takral picked up the ration can and shook it. His partner, Officer Jarak, swallowed hoarsely. That's impossible. I personally checked the warehouse yesterday. Takral wiped the sweat from his brow. Can you feel it? Jack nodded. Silence. Crawl looked around. Where is everyone? The base, which had been home to several hundred soldiers yesterday, looked empty today. A few bodies lay in the corridors. No signs of a struggle. No wounds. Only frozen faces with wide-open eyes. The horror. It's a trap. Crawl's voice was barely audible. We are trapped, deep underground, human headquarters. Captain Jack Thornton was reviewing the latest tapes. A group of men in dark armor stood next to him. Thornton smiled again. Let them think we're everywhere. He turned on the underground communication system. A second later, voices rang out across the planet. Whispers, barely audible, the kind that made your hair stand on end. You shouldn't be here. You've already lost. You won't survive the winter. Imperial Base Omega-17. Officer Lakir heard it, a whisper. Who's there? He yelled, firing into the darkness. No one answered. Instead, the light began to flicker. His shadow lengthened, and he saw that it was moving differently than he was. Lakir opened his mouth to scream, but he didn't have time. The command center of the occupation forces. Zahan peered at the latest data. The communications officer looked pale. We've lost 2 more bases. What? The officer nodded. Just lost contact. No explosions. No battles. The people are gone. Zahan rested his hands on the table. I don't play these games anymore. Put the garrisons on full alert. The officer wanted to say something but didn't have time. The lights went out. For a moment there was complete darkness. And then a message came into the communication system. It seemed to come from all the speakers at once. Only 3 words. You are dead. Galactic date 4765. Planet Nova Terra. Darkness. This was their new world. The high-tech army of the Zkor Empire that had once marched through the streets was now hiding in fortified areas, surrounded by invisible enemies. People were not visible, but they were there. The shadow on the roof could be a sniper. A sound behind us could be a scout. Every dark street, every basement, every closed shop could be an ambush, the command center of the occupation forces. Admiral Zahan stared at the tactical display and something inside him screamed, "It's a trap." On the screen, 45% of the troops have deserted or disappeared. 85% of supply routes are blocked. 90% of garrisons were left without communication. No one knew where the soldiers had gone. They just disappeared. Latest reports? Zahan's voice was sharp. Zathorn, the chief strategist, looked exhausted. We received a distress call from Sector 14 20 minutes ago. After that, there was silence. Zahan leaned forward. What did they say? Zathorn slowly pressed the play button. A recording came from the speakers. This is Base 14. We are under attack. We can't see them. They're everywhere. The air is starting to smell like Solo. A hiss. End of communication. The Admiral was silent for several seconds, staring at the blank screen. He turned sharply to the comms officer. Prepare to evacuate the officer corps. The fleet must be ready to withdraw strategic command. Zathorn paled. My lord, that means we're admitting defeat. We're not admitting anything. We are merely regrouping. He did not believe his words. The Empire had never retreated, but they could not fight in such conditions. It was not a war. It was a hunt, and they were the prey. Gamma 12 base. Sergeant Crawl sat on the floor, clutching his rifle. He hadn't slept for 3 days. He heard footsteps somewhere behind the wall. Silence. And again, a whisper. You are not welcome here. Crawl covered his ears. Get out! Get out! His partner, Jarak, shook his head. Everything's gone wrong. We can't stay here. Crawl gritted his teeth. Retreat? That's treason. Jarak glanced nervously at the door. Don't you see? We are being wiped out, and not even with weapons. He pointed to the body of one of the officers. Again, no wounds, only wide-open eyes. Crawl was breathing heavily. What did they do to him? Jarak clenched his fists. I don't know, but I know I can't wait any longer. I'm leaving. He grabbed his backpack and headed for the exit. But he didn't make it 10 steps. He heard a sound, a click. Something fell from the ventilation hatch, something black. Jarak screamed, and then there was silence. Crawl didn't even have time to see what it was. The flagship, the enduring judgment. In orbit, things were not going according to plan either. The Imperial fleet began to come under attack, but these were not massive assaults or large flotillas. These were invisible attacks. Every night, local time, ships disappeared. Without explosions, without a fight, they just disappeared, one by one. Admiral Zahan could no longer ignore it. He was standing on the bridge when the alarm sounded again. The comms officer looked terrified. The inevitable judgment has been disabled. What caused it? We don't know. All systems are down. The crew is not responding. Zahan tried to contact the ship's commander. Finally, a blurry image appeared on the screen. The admiral stared at the image. It was the captain of the inevitable judgment, but something was wrong. His eyes were wide open. "What is he saying?" whispered one of the officers. The sound analyzer turned up the volume, and then they heard, "You are not needed here. You are not needed here. You are not welcome here." It was repeated over and over again. Zahan felt something cold squeeze his chest. "Cut the connection." The image disappeared. There was a deathly silence. Zahan knew he could no longer hide the truth. They could not fight here. The Empire was losing. Deep underground, human headquarters. Captain Jack Thornton smiled as he watched the data. His squad stood nearby, reviewing the latest reports. Thornton calmly closed the tablet. "Now they'll run." He turned to his men. "And we're not going to stop them. Flagship Unbreakable Judgment." Zahan finally did something he had never done before. He pressed the emergency button. His voice was dry, but there was something in it that he didn't want to show. Fear. "All Empire forces. Commence evacuation. Repeat, begin evacuation. Galactic date 4766. Orbit of Nova Terra. The evacuation of the Imperial forces has descended into chaos." Admiral Zahan stood on the bridge of the flagship, Unbreakable Judgment, clasping his four hands behind his back. Everything he saw in the tactical report seemed impossible. The Empire had always won, but now his army was defeated, his fleet was demoralized, and the planet they thought they had conquered had suddenly turned into a fortress that defied all laws of war. "How many more ships are ready to enter hyperspace?" he asked sharply. The officer answered without looking up. "Only 37%, my lord. The rest are blocked or unable to leave due to system failures." Zahan felt his body shackled by fear. He was no longer in control of the situation. He was only trying to save those who could still escape. But there was nowhere to run. The battle had begun. "Anomaly in hyperspace. Enemy ships have left the gravity jump." These words sounded like a death sentence. On the tactical display, space split as dozens of ships came out of FTL. But these weren't the standard battleships or cruisers that the Federation or Empire usually built. The human ships were not large. They were not formidable in appearance. But they moved like no ship in space should move. The Imperial officers froze. This can't be true. Instead of classic frontal combat, the human ships attacked like hunters. They bisected the space around the Imperial vessels, using gravitational distortions that made their maneuvers unpredictable. "The enemy ships have changed vector. They are using our own force fields against us." It was pure tactics. The human cruisers did not fire directly at the Imperial vessels. They jammed communications, disrupted navigation, forcing ships to crash into each other. No one destroyed the Empire's fleet. It fell by itself. Earth. The counterattack of the people. There was no chaos in the cities. People did not slaughter the invaders or take revenge. It was a military operation accurate as a scalpel. The guerrillas worked with navigational strikes, disabling the bases without casualties. Special forces shut down power grids, leaving the enemy without support and communications. Combat drones blocked retreat routes, blocking the way to evacuation zones. Enemy garrisons have lost control of the defense. People are not fighting with us. They are forcing us to retreat. A turning point. Zahan realized it too late. This was not random chaos. It was a perfectly planned trap. The fleet has lost control. The hyperdrives are locked out. "What?" shouted the admiral. His eyes flashed with lightning as he looked back at the tactical screen. All the Imperial ships were locked in the planet's gravitational field. They were not allowed to retreat. "Admiral Zahan," a voice came over the open channel. A voice that made him freeze. "You have been warned. You invaded our home. Did you think you could leave? We are giving you a choice. You lay down your arms or you stay here forever." The Empire's choice. Absolute silence reigned on the bridge of the enduring judgment. Zahan looked at his officers. They were all afraid. They knew that if they did not surrender now, their fleet would be destroyed. But this was not a barbaric massacre. People did not destroy those who could not resist. They simply showed that the Empire no longer had power here. Zahan realized this. He clenched his fists. He pressed the open communication channel. "We surrender." Imperial ships began to lay down their arms. Units on the planet surrendered without a fight. People did not kill unarmed people. They did not take slaves. They did not humiliate the defeated. They simply kicked the Empire out. And the whole universe knew it now. The humans had won. And that was just the beginning. Galactic date 4768, orbit of New Terra. The Imperial fleet was in retreat. It was not an organized strategic evacuation, but a panicked flight of those who could still escape. On the screens of the command center, people watched as the Empire's battle cruisers and transport vessels turned on their hyperdrives and disappeared one by one, leaving behind wreckage, inoperable outposts, and those they hadn't managed to evacuate. The flagship, the Unbreakable Judgment, remained the last ship of the enemy fleet hovering in the upper atmosphere. Its shields no longer worked. The onboard guns were silent. Admiral Zahan stood on the bridge, his hands firmly resting on the control panel. His face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected something more than anger or humiliation. "Final preparations for the hyperspace jump are complete, my lord," one of the officers reported. "We are leaving this sector," Zahan confirmed, trying to keep his voice firm. "Tell all Empire ships that none of them are to return here." The officer nodded and relayed the order. Zahan sighed and took one last look at the planet. It was no longer just a strategic object or another colony. It was a world they wanted to enslave, but instead, they got a disaster. Never again, he thought, and with a sense of bitter defeat, he ordered the fleet to hyperspace. When the last ship of the Empire disappeared, silence reigned in the system. Planet Nova Terra, Defense Command Center. Captain Jack Thornton watched everything through the main screen of the Military Command Center. "They're gone," Commander Sarah Williams said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Yes, but don't forget why they're gone," Thornton replied. "Because we made it so they couldn't stay," she added. The command center was filled with quiet joy and relief. People were not celebrating, not cheering loudly, not shouting slogans. They just looked up at the sky and realized that their home belonged to them again. "Let's start rebuilding," Thornton said, looking at the destruction left behind by the war. Nova Terra had survived, but it had to pay a high price. Orbit, negotiations with the Empire. A few hours later, a message appeared on the encrypted channel. "This is the Imperial Envoy," the communications officer said. The holographic screen flickered as the image adjusted. "People of Earth," he began, his tone forcedly even, "the Empire recognizes your victory in this conflict." "This was not a war for power," Williams replied. "That is correct," the envoy acknowledged. "We have received a report from Admiral Zahan. You have demonstrated that your military methods are effective. The Emperor has decided not to send any more expeditions to your sector. You will never touch our worlds again," Williams confirmed. The envoy nodded. "That is not negotiable." "Do you have a request?" Williams finally asked. "We have an offer," the envoy replied. "A new order in the galaxy." The Empire did not simply want to retreat. They realized that humanity was not as weak as they thought. People were not wild or barbaric. They did not start a senseless war. They used intelligence, restraint, and strategy to force the enemy to retreat. The Empire could not afford any more such disasters. "We are ready to consider a new order of coexistence," the envoy said. "You want peace?" Williams asked. "We want stability," he corrected. "We cannot afford another conflict like this." The connection ended, leaving humanity to face a new challenge. "They want peace because they're afraid of us," Thornton said. "And they're right," Williams replied. "What do? We give them a chance," the commander shrugged. "And if they try to attack again, we show them that was their last mistake." The people were not aggressors. They did not seek to capture or conquer. But if the enemy came to their house with a sword, they would make him swallow it. For the first time in a long time, Nova Terra slept peacefully. But in the dark corners of the galaxy, maps were already being changed, alliances were being rewritten, and new theories about humanity were being built. No one considered them weak anymore. The Empire had retreated, but everyone knew that this was only the beginning of a new era. Galactic date 4790, United Council of Civilizations, the central sector of the galaxy. The galaxy had changed. The Empire was no longer the undisputed hegemon. After the catastrophic defeat on New Terra, many worlds once considered vassals or colonies of the Empire reconsidered their loyalties. It was a turning point in the history of interstellar politics. In the giant hall of the United Council of Civilizations, where representatives of hundreds of species met, All the influential leaders of the galaxy gathered today. In the middle of the hall, at a round table, sat three representatives of humanity: Commodore Sarah Williams, who led the defense of New Terra; Ambassador James Hayward, who is now in charge of diplomatic relations between Earth and the galactic community; Dr. Nathan Graves, a military strategist and expert in interspecies diplomacy. Hundreds of eyes watched their every move. Humanity, Supreme Chancellor Zirnath of the Ortal Federation finally spoke. Your victory on New Terra has changed the balance of power. And now we face the question, what will be the future of the galaxy? Sarah Williams looked around the room. Many still underestimated the humans. Others were afraid of them. Our future is not determined by wars, but by stability, she said. Humanity is not looking for conquest. We only want our worlds to never again be a threat to anyone else. But if we are attacked again, the response will be the same as on Nova Terra. Silence reigned in the room. The new reality. After the retreat of the Empire, many of its old vassals were in chaos. There were riots, uprisings, and internal conflicts, and humanity itself became the force that filled the vacuum. No, they did not establish a dictatorship or military control, but they started playing by new rules. Now our presence in the galaxy is undeniable, said James Hayward at a diplomatic meeting with the Federation of Trade Worlds. If any state attacks us or our allies, it must understand the consequences, and these consequences have already been seen by everyone. Attempts at rebellion. There were those who tried to resist the new order. Some of the old imperial elite did not want to accept the new balance of power. The colony of Yarlos IV, inhabited by several thousand imperial citizens, rebelled against the human presence in the galaxy. Several hundred militants landed on its surface, trying to regain control of the former Empire base. They believed that the humans would not take harsh measures, but they were wrong. 6 hours after the rebellion began, human special forces neutralized the rebels with minimal losses. They did not kill those who surrendered. They did not organize senseless massacres, but they acted quickly, coolly, and professionally. When the last of the militants were captured, one clear message was sent across the galaxy. People will not allow chaos to return. Laws against separatism. After several similar incidents, humanity initiated a new galactic stability treaty. It consisted of several points. Any military coup or uprising against the established order will be eliminated with the support of international forces. No species has the right to discriminate against another because of their physiology or origin. All parties recognize the sovereignty of human worlds and their allies. In case of security threats, humanity has the right to take preventive measures. Many were outraged. "You are usurping power," shouted representatives of radical groups. "You control politics through fear." But the truth was different. People were not telling others how to live. They were simply setting rules that no one else could ignore. The final test. There was only one world that refused to submit. The colony of Loconaris VII, which remained under the control of the remnants of the Empire, refused to sign the treaty. "We're not forcing you to submit," Dr. Nathan Graves said during the negotiations. "But you must understand that if you choose to attack or cause destabilization, we will respond, and you will not like it." Loconaris did not listen. They opened fire on Federation merchant ships, hoping to ignite a new conflict. But instead of a major war, they received an instant response. An hour after the first strike, human warships appeared over Loconaris. They did not fire. They simply blockaded the planet, using gravity technology to make any exit or entry impossible. 2 days later, the colony surrendered without firing a shot, and then even the most aggressive opponents of humanity realized they could not be defeated. A year after the Battle of New Terra, humanity became one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. They did not conquer planets. They did not destroy civilizations, but they were establishing order, and everyone understood this. The galaxy was no longer the same, and everyone knew one thing: humanity should never be trifled with again.